Mm-mm.
Welcome back to K Chat with me, your host, Kayla Morales. We chat all things from love to business to spirituality, health and wellness, and everything in between. This is a space of growth, understanding, and meaningful connection. If this episode resonates with you, please like, comment, and share. All of those things really help me out when it comes to figuring out what you might like to hear next. All right, I'm so excited to share this episode with you all. So let's get to chatting. Today's guest is a talented writer, content creator, and a dear friend of mine. She has turned her love for writing and sports into a career for herself. I am so inspired by her drive and her story, and I know you all will be as well. Let's welcome Miss Jordan Ligons. What's up?
Yay! Thank you so much for having me on K Chat.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I'm excited to chat with you. Like I feel like we haven't had a really big conversation in a little while, so I feel like this will be good.
Yeah. Yes, I'm so
Um,
excited.
let's like begin with your journey as a writer. Like when did you first fall in love with writing and kind of how'd you get to where you are now?
Yeah, so I first fell in love with writing, really the storytelling of writing. I think I was in second grade and I wrote a book called The Prince and Me.
Mm.
And we got to like bound it by cardstock and I picked pink and I got to, draw the cover. And I was so excited because these were my words and I created something. It was able to tell this story and I created these characters. And then I realized slowly, getting into journalism that sometimes we don't have to make up fictional characters. We have our own stories that are amazing and are need to be told and shared. So in high school, I was editor in chief of our newspaper and really, investigative journalism at 10th grade.
Yeah.
Um, I look back at those and they are so terrible, really bad. But it was more of just the processes that go within journalism, talking to people, getting sources, and I realized that that really fired me up. That got me so excited. So then I went to college and was able to stay on the newspaper for them and having amazing professors that pushed me to dig deeper into stories and more nonfiction writing and instead of just an interview one-on-one, what's behind the curtain, what are they not telling, what's around you, what else are you able to interview them about.
Yeah.
So now it's doing more of that, but also figuring out other ways to tell stories in content, whether that be on social and video and podcasting and everything. It's
Yeah.
all vessels to tell stories. So it still gets me really excited.
Yeah, I feel like you would be great at having a podcast. Have you thought about it?
I am working on that at my
Yeah.
job now.
Oh, okay, okay. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
congratulations on your new job, by the way.
thank you. I'm so excited about it. And that was a part of the pool. I was going to be able to get a WNBA podcast at The Ringer, but now being able to talk about youth sports and be able to interview people that, what are your lessons you learned from youth sports? What are some coaches that really inspired you? And kind of keeping with the passion of sport. Like
Yeah.
sports change lives, which is what I'm so passionate about and I love about sports. And I will tell everybody that sports are the best. So getting more to the root of that, and I'm launching their audio and podcast sphere.
Cool. Oh, that's so cool. Congrats. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
I want to go back and kind of talk about your journey like as a writer through college, and then you got your first big girl job like at
Mm-hmm.
locale. Like I want to talk about that whole thing, and then your transition to the Ringer. I want to go deep because I know that was like a tricky time for you, and I think
Yeah.
it yeah, I think it would just be helpful to share that story.
Yeah. So my senior year, I played basketball at Point Loma all 4 years. Me and Kayla went to school together.
Shout out Point
Uh,
Loma again.
um, w- my senior year, I got injured. I tore my labrum in my shoulder, and it was like probably 3 weeks before senior night, like end of the season, end of my
Wow.
career. It was devastating. This is not how I wanted to end my basketball career. But because of that, I was really able to start thinking about what's next. Like, we're about to
Mhm.
graduate. Where do you want to work? What do you want to do? So I found this posting for a job of an editor. Um, it was over a month old, the posting. So I was like, I'm just shooting my shot. I'm a senior in college. We need to shoot all the shots. Um, I looked at the editor and I'm like, okay, I'm just out of college. I can't possibly be an editor.
Mm.
So I sent an email to the publisher, which is really wild now that I think about it, but whatever. And I just said, I'm about to graduate. I don't know if I'm qualified to be an editor, but if you need an editorial assistant, here's my website, here's some of my clips, here's my resume. And he forwarded off to the CFO, and she reached out to me and said, can you come for an interview like next week? And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And so long story short, I got the editor job, and it turned into a senior editor after being there for 2 years and really helping shape the voice of the magazine. And it was tough because that was my dream job. My dream job was
Yeah.
to be a magazine editor, but that was my first job ever.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a little different than what I expected. It wasn't Jenna Rink from 13 going on 30. It was a
Yeah.
little it was a little different. It was a lot about, advertising and partners and turning it into advertorials. So I felt like my voice was getting lost. It was all about money.
Yeah.
Um, and ethically, that didn't sit well with me. And it never did, really, from like my first week there. But I kind of pushed it aside, repressed those emotions because it was my dream job. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, well, this is just what it is. Um, but then I realized over those 2.5 years that I kept gravitating to the sports stories. I wanted to write about every athlete. I was the only person that really knew about sports, but I also loved that I could tell their story from a former athlete perspective.
Yeah.
And so when I was looking for other opportunities, I saw The Ringer. I knew who Bill Simmons was. He is a um, world-renowned journalist, sports journalist and Celtics fan, but I don't hold that against him. And um, I saw that it was a fact checker, and I knew that that was a step down. I was a senior
Yeah.
editor, and I was like in love with this title, and I wanted to kind of ride that wave. But I knew it was a step back to propel me forward. I knew that
Yeah.
I was a senior editor at a local publication. So I was Anaheim senior editor level,
Yeah.
but this would be a step in the door to sports journalism, moving to LA and being able to know that it's going to grow. My journalism skills are going to grow. I'm going to be around really smart writers. And so I took it. I remember my mom being like, "You're not married. You don't have any kids. You have no ties to
I love when
Anaheim."
moms give that speech. It's like, you can do anything right now with your life. Like, do it.
I know, it was kind of sad. I was like, "Okay, I know I'm not married. Thanks." But it was a reminder like, okay, this is the time. This would be the
Yeah.
time to move to LA, to, take a chance to pivot in my career to sports journalism. And when I got there, I had a huge case of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I was like, I love sports and I know a lot about sports, but you guys know a lot about sports and you guys are
Yeah.
very good writers. So it was so humbling. Like that senior editor title meant nothing because they were coming from Wall Street Journal, ESPN,
Yeah.
and they were like actual journalists.
I want to go back for
So
a second. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, go.
Um, did you ever feel like you suffered from imposter syndrome at locale? Like what were your challenges there?
I didn't. I
Okay.
felt like I was fresh out of journalism school.
Hmm.
So I was like on this mission to restore journalism. I was like, we're
Hmm.
going to tell stories, we're going to get sources, it's going to be all this. And it was deflating because that's not how they ran their magazine. It was
Hmm.
like, okay, we need to talk to our partner who paid for this story, and they're going to tell you everything that you need to know. And it's going to be super glossed over and not the journalistic truth. It's going
Yeah.
to be the whatever they want to present,
Like
which
sugar
is
coated. Yeah.
sugar coated. It's very like, it was for the camera. And coming out of journalism school, that was like the opposite of everything that I learned. So I didn't have as much imposter syndrome there. I think it was hard because it was a small magazine and you
Hmm.
were expected to do a lot. You
Hmm.
weren't just editing, you were writing, you were looking for freelancers, you were hosting events, you were doing everything, which would probably be, 6 different jobs at a typical magazine or newspaper. So that was a challenge, but I'm thankful for that because now I'm in a position at a startup where you're doing the same thing. Like that's just
Hmm.
what happens. You got to
Yeah.
wear all these different hats. So I'm thankful for that. But getting to the ringer, that's when the imposter syndrome set in. I
Yeah.
started thinking, oh, I'm not even good enough to be here. Like, what was I thinking I had in my mind, I'm going to be a fact checker for 6 months. I'm going to blow them away. I'm going to be a writer. And this is what I'm going to do. Classic Jordan, if you know me. But that didn't happen. I was a fact checker for 2 years and
Yeah.
I still pretty much had to beg for writing opportunities. Whereas at locale it was like, yeah, Jordan, whatever you want to write, like go ahead.
Yeah.
It's just it was different. So that was tough. That was definitely tough.
What do you think is like your one takeaway, like major takeaway from the ringer?
My major takeaway from the ringer is probably as cheesy as it sounds, but believe in yourself. And
Mm,
I think because I had that imposter syndrome and thinking I wasn't good enough, but really being able to carve out a lane for me
mhm,
with WNBA coverage, they were not covering the WNBA at scale. And I saw that void and I said, I played basketball. I love women's sports. Like, this is something I can add to your company.
mm,
And really knowing my worth in that, knowing how good of a writer I am, knowing that I wanted to be on podcasts, putting my mind to it and saying, like, you guys need this. I'm here. This isn't my position, but I'm willing to help in that way. I know that's also going to help me, build my clips. And I have these published articles on theringer.com and being able to be recognized for that on
yeah,
Twitter and everywhere else. It's like, oh, Jordan is the WNBA correspondent for the Ringer, and trying to like put my stakeholder for that. So that wouldn't have happened if I didn't believe in myself and know my worth and know what I can offer, because they weren't going to offer that to me. They
yeah,
just wanted me to keep fact checking. So you kind of have to jump out there, see a void, and say, okay, how can I fill this? Because they aren't going to pay someone extra to fill this. You're already paying me. So let's help each other out, basically.
I feel like, well, one, I'm so proud of you. Like that's really powerful.
Thank
And
you.
it like not only for yourself, but as a woman, like um advocating for other women and like seeing the lack in diversity in their stories and bringing it to everyone else's awareness and then fulfilling it is like really cool. what do you think was like the switch for you? Like between imposter syndrome and then like stepping into your power and like kind of advocating for yourself in order to get that spot.
Here's where I'm going to do the cheesy shout out of my boyfriend,
Mm,
because Freddie really helped me realize when I felt like, wow, they know so much. Like, I don't know
mhm.
enough. I'm like studying stats to be able to keep up in conversation
Yeah.
with them. And that was specifically about the NBA and also other sports.
Mhm.
But when it came to the WNBA, he really empowered me to say, like, you know this. Like, this isn't new to you. You are a fan of women's basketball, but you know all their stories, you know their names, you know where they went to college, you know their stats, and step into that. And he
Mm,
really spoke life into me to say, like, they may have their own thing and they know what they know, but you know what you know. Like, being able
yeah.
to say, like, you can hold your weight in the WNBA conversation. Ever since we had that talk, and I was asked to go on podcasts, I was asked to write, it was, I know this, and I'm speaking from my point of view. I'm speaking from a place of going to all those Sparks games, from watching the Monarchs as a little girl. Like, I know what I'm talking about, and being able to own that, and the imposter syndrome went away. And I knew also, if we're talking about baseball, I don't know a lot, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
That's
Like,
all
I
right.
don't
That's
have to know everything, because some people do, and that's amazing. But
yeah.
I'm not going to continue to compare myself to what they know, their brain, their knowledge, their past experiences. I can't compete with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, good old
That's
Freddie.
that's so good. Yeah, go Freddie. We stand. So also I think I remember this about locale and I could be wrong, you can correct me. But what was it like being one of very few Black women in the space, especially in a leadership position, right?
Yeah, I was the
What
only
was
one.
what was that like? What kind of responsibility do you feel like that came with?
It comes with a lot of responsibility.
Mm.
Unfortunately, I'm used to it. Um, especially going to Point Loma,
Yeah.
where me and Kayla were the only Black girls across campus. But I went to Locale, which is, let me just set the scene for you. It's Orange County, it's Newport Beach, it's a luxury lifestyle magazine. We have, Botox partners, we have all of these things that is just so Real Housewives of Orange County. Literally, they were on our cover. So I felt an enormous responsibility to be able to say, especially in our LA magazines and our San Diego magazines and our Las Vegas market, not everybody looks like this. Not
Mhm.
everybody is white and blonde like all the people that work here and who you're putting on your covers. I think I had, an enormous impact there by saying we need to diversify who we feature,
Yeah.
because that came down to our name and a person's face is on this cover. We need to show that we are for more people than just the select few that are white and rich that live in Newport. Like, it
Mhm.
has to be bigger than that, because the topics that we're talking about and the stories are worth that. They're bigger than that. Um so being able to have the first Black woman on their cover and be able to speak up and vouch for them, and also seeing after I left how they continue to have more diversity on their cover. I think that's just very important. But it was hard. It was a lot of responsibility to be the only one and feeling like I
Oh,
had
the
to
only, yeah.
vet out everything that could be problematic or um different. and them just not having even diversity in their friendship circles and their families. And then that was the same at the Ringer. That was a much bigger company, and I was still the only Black woman.
Wow.
And when everything after, the killing of George Floyd this past May, feeling like I was like the free diversity officer
Ugh.
for a company. Um, and that was like my added on title that I did not want. So that's an extra burden kind of.
Yeah.
I changed it a little different. I knew that was coming. I knew that was going to happen. I knew the
Mhm.
guilty messages were going to start flowing. And I just wanted to open the conversation, because if you don't have this conversation with a Black woman or a Black man, anyone of color, you're going to go and have another conversation with one of your white friends and not
Yeah.
be able to know what you're saying wrong, know what's problematic with what you're saying, what you're doing. So I did take that on for a little bit
Yeah.
to
I
be like, I'm okay with having that conversation.
yeah, I feel like there's like this divide a little bit because it is a lot of responsibility and a
Hmm.
heavy weight to carry that like nobody should have to carry.
Right.
But there is like a divide in that I think about often. And I'm like, I'll take on the story, like I'll take on not the story, but I'll take on the responsibility
Yeah.
and have these conversations. But on the other side, it's like, but I don't want to. So you like try to
Yeah.
balance out like, what's best, but it does burden you and it affects your health, like your mental health and even sometimes your actual health. So,
Yeah. It was a
but
lot.
um, but I'm really proud of
2020 has
you.
been a lot.
2020. But I'm proud of you for like, I think between locale and then the Ringer, you had your moments of like you lit like a flame at both of those jobs in different ways, and those flames are still burning even though you have left. And I think
Thanks.
that's so cool, like that's literally little pieces of your legacy, like changing media, which is we consume so much of it, so it's so important. I'm really, really proud of you. That's so cool. It's like good to hear.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
um I want to talk about your health for a little too, because during after college, I believe, right? Or maybe your senior
Hmm.
year. Um, um, yeah, let's just talk about your health journey. Let's start with how you kind of started figuring things out, the symptoms and stuff.
Yes. So I have type 1 diabetes. And after, I think it was 2017, I had been getting so sick. First, I lost about 35 pounds,
Mm.
which I'm not a big person. I was down to like 110, which is like the smallest I've ever been since probably third grade. I lost my butt. It was really sad, but
Oh, I'm
I,
so sorry.
I got it back. Don't worry.
Okay, good, good.
Um, but I didn't realize I was losing weight. I love clothes, I love fashion, and I realized when I put things on, it was just like not looking right. I also became really addicted to sugar. I was downing sodas, which is so unlike me. I don't even like sodas. I was going to Sonic every day after work and
Dang.
getting a milkshake and cookies, and I was addicted to it. So I knew something was wrong there. I also kept getting infections, which is a part of diabetes that I later found out, because there's so much sugar in your blood that it can't heal.
Mhm.
So getting like yeast infections, and I had like a scar on my foot that wouldn't heal, and
Oh,
different things like that. So another thing is I kept having to go to the bathroom. I was going to the bathroom probably like 4 to 5 times an hour, and just really couldn't hold my pee. It was horrible. Thinking of all of those things that are going wrong, I kept going to the doctor thinking, I just needed help with my infections.
Yeah.
They kept putting me on antibiotics. I was on 6 different antibiotics, which was making me more sick. And antibiotics do so much good, but they also do a lot of damage,
Mm-hmm.
especially in a body that has a lot of things going wrong. Then I also didn't tell my family. I just thought every time I went to the doctor, it was gonna be fixed. I really
Yeah.
put trust in our doctors and
Yeah.
said, okay, yeah, like this antibiotic's gonna do it. Then I would get more sick. I was so strong willed that like I don't wanna tell my family when I'm living alone, I have my own apartment, like I'm doing good. I don't wanna
Yeah.
share with them that I'm failing at something.
Oh,
Um,
Jordan.
I know. It goes deep. It's
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
But my sister is a nurse and I finally told her and I said, "You know, I've been on 6 different antibiotics. I listed all of my symptoms." And she said, "You have diabetes." And I'm never a person to like Google symptoms. I wasn't doing that. So if I would have Googled it this time, it would have been textbook
Dang.
type 1 diabetes. But I didn't. I know that there's false information out there, so I didn't want to go crazy.
Yeah.
So she said, "You have diabetes. It runs in our family. You need to go back to the lab and get blood work done." So once I did that, they realized that my blood sugar was at 430, which for reference, an average person should be between 72 and 100. Um, I was at 430. So
Wow.
I had so much sugar in my blood, and that's also what was played a part in the addiction to sugar. Like I
Mhm.
needed it to keep going. Um, and I remember I called my doctor who I had just seen, who was, you know, a gynecologist, and I was yelling at her. I was like, "How did you not check my blood sugar? Like, how do you not
Yeah.
know that? How are you not even like you just told me to take more medicine?" And she was like, "Well, I don't think you have diabetes." And then she looked at my blood work. She was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, that is pretty high." She's like, "Yeah, well, you should probably you know, make an appointment." And that was it. And I was like, I've been sick for months at that
Yeah.
point. It was so horrible. And a turning point in there is when I went to Chicago to visit my sister, still didn't tell them I was sick. On the flight there, it was a 4-hour flight. I went to the bathroom 6 times and
Dang.
I was miserable.
Oh, yeah.
So it was horrible to think that. And then, you know, I came home. I told my parents, I was crying. They were like, "Yeah, you actually look like you've lost a lot of weight. You don't look well. We are coming home right now." And that's when I came home. They saw me. I was still very sick. I'd lost more weight even just in the couple days I came home. They took me to the emergency room. I was also really dehydrated. I couldn't drink enough water that my body needs. I had like
Mhm.
sores on the side of my mouth because of how dry my mouth was. And went to the emergency room and they told me, "Yep, you're a type 1 diabetic. You have to take insulin for the rest of your life." And it runs in our family. It's hereditary. My uncle is a type 1 diabetic. Um, and it was horrible news. It was
Yeah.
horrible, but also good news because I can figure out what was wrong with me
Mhm.
after these 6 months of just feeling awful. Um, but it was heartbreaking to say, like, your life as you know it is going to change. And I was 23 years old, so I had lived this whole life of not having to count carbs and not having to poke myself with needles, with insulin. But now it's who I am and it's a part of my story and my testimony. And yeah, now it's insulin all day, every day.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And because I could not even imagine going through all of those symptoms for so long and just not knowing. So yeah, I think like it's great that you can share your story and maybe if someone else is going through that, they can get the help that they need. What is there anything that you now know that you wish you knew then?
Mm, I think being patient with myself, and I still struggle with that. I mean, I think just a couple weeks ago, I kind of broke down of just really hating that I have this. I
Mm,
hate it. And it's not like this fun, glamorous thing. It's a disease, and it's something that I could potentially pass on to my children, which is also very scary. Um, but being patient to know that it's based off of my body. It's not, 1 plus 1 equals 2. It's
mm,
how are you feeling? And really having to check in with myself to say, okay, you're feeling really low, you're starting to sweat, you need to eat more. And there was a time there that I didn't want to eat. It was like I don't want to poke myself. I don't want to put in insulin.
yeah.
So okay, I'm just not going to eat as much. And then there's like, okay, you're crashing, you're going low. You actually have to eat. You have to eat something very sugary because your blood sugar is dropping. Um,
Can you
so I think,
explain? Sorry,
yeah, go
keep
ahead.
keep going. I'm sorry, I totally cut you off.
No, no, no. I was just going to say that to be patient with myself, to understand that this is something even 3 years in, I'm still very new at. And I just have to take it day by day. That's all that I can do.
Yeah. Can you explain like what the repercussions are if if you don't eat, and like if your sugar drops too low, can you explain like what those what happens if that happens?
Yeah, so basically anytime that I eat, I have to take insulin. But if my blood sugar, for example, is at 150 and I go on a run, that exercise is going to drop my blood sugar. So then if I just go about my day and don't have a snack or anything to kind of level it out, then I will crash. And that's when, any textbook, probably any movie you saw where someone is a diabetic and they're sweating. I start fumbling over my words, and you just feel terrible. Like you just don't have any energy to go on because
Mm,
sugar and food gives us energy and it gives
yeah.
us life, and it's able for us to keep going. So without that, I just start to crumble. Like I just become this old lady that's like crawls into a ball because I don't have enough energy to keep going. So
Wow.
you have to eat, and diabetes is all about trying to keep it level. You don't want your numbers to be too high, like how I was, because
Mhm.
then all those symptoms start coming back. And you don't want it to be too low, or you sweat and you are just feeling horrible. So you're trying to keep it in the middle. And a normal person, whenever you eat, your pancreas produces insulin. So it
Mhm.
matches that sugar. So my pancreas doesn't work. It pieced out. So I have to inject myself with insulin to meet those carbs. So just trying to keep it level. That's
Yeah,
all that
I
diabetes
see.
is. Hmm.
What are I'm sure there's some things that people say or do that is really frustrating, um, in regards to diabetes specifically.
Hmm.
Do you have any of those that you can tell? Like, what's like one
Yeah.
of those myths that you're like, shut the F up? Like,
Oh, yeah. I think the biggest one is the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
mhm,
So, type 2 is something that your uncle or your grandmother has because over time, their poor eating habits and lack of exercise just kind of caught up with them. And their A1C, which is kind of your blood sugar over the course of a 3-month span or so, is probably a 7, which anything a 7 above is diabetes. So they're like right at the border.
mhm.
My A1C was a 13. So it
Okay.
was very high and
Wow.
not reversible. It's nothing that I can change. It's my pancreas is done for. Type 2, you can still produce insulin. It's just working, it's not able to keep up with all the carbs that you're intaking.
Mm,
So if you switch to eating salads and take your walks every day, then you can lower that A1C, get off of medication, and your life goes back to normal. For
mm,
a type 1, that will never be the case. I just have to eat that way forever and exercise forever, and then you're still going to have it.
mm,
So I think right when I got diagnosed, it was like, oh, you can fight this. Like, you can reverse it, you can change
mm.
it. And it's like, no, I can't. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to be with me. So that's probably the biggest one, of the lack of education for the differences between type 1 and type 2.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. That was a good explanation.
Thanks.
Um, Let me go back to my notes real quick. uh, oh yeah. Any advice for anyone who wants to get into freelance writing? Back to
Ooh,
writing.
back to writing. Advice. Freelance writing is hard. I'm not
Mhm,
gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. There are people that do freelance writing full time, and
mhm.
that's just their jam. And you have to hustle, like, to make a living off of freelance writing. Like, it's not for me.
Yeah.
But if you want to go into it on the side as like a side hustle, know what you can bring to that publication. It kind of goes back to that. If you see that it's a sports website that doesn't have women's sports writing or WNBA, and you feel like you can add that, reach out to whoever the editor is, or maybe somebody who has written about WNBA on that website. See who you can connect to and just start formulating a relationship, sending them pitches. If something sparks your interest, sending it over to them, making sure that you have your invoices in check, know that how much their rate is, be able to keep track of all that. I think that's the tip for freelancing, is
Mhm.
knowing where your money is coming in, knowing who's not paying you. That's why I always blast. I wish I could put on a shirt like, pay your freelancers on time,
Yeah.
because nobody
Seriously.
does. So being able to have that log of invoices, knowing where you submit pitches, knowing what they've already published of yours, being able to keep a log, and then shopping that around more. The more names that you get published, being able to say, I was published on this and this and this. And really,
Mhm.
like, you have to toot your own horn in freelancing.
Yeah.
That is not a humble business at all. You're
Yeah.
saying, this is what I can bring for you, and you need to pay me off of the normal payroll for you to, publish it. So you have to really be into yourself. You got to know it.
Yeah. I think that's freelance for any any job. You
Anything.
gotta like hustle.
Yes,
Which you
you
remind
do.
me, I have an invoice I need to send. I'm so bad at that. But yes, keep
Send those
track of your
invoices,
finances.
collect those checks.
Yeah. Any pitch advice? Like any advice for reaching out and even just I guess for a job, but yeah, good luck. Go.
Yeah. I know that when I received pitches, kind of being on the other end of that when I was at Local, I always loved pitches that were, you did a lot of the homework already.
Mm.
I To kind of give a better example of what not to do is just being like, oh, I saw that this one girl, and like link her Instagram, like she seems really cool. Like, that's not what, okay. Being able to see pitches that are already well thought out and saying like, okay, here's Kayla, here's her story, here's her Instagram. She was featured on this and this. I think she would be great for, put in the publication there because this and this and this, and being able to really be detailed in that. So since I've seen the pitches come through, it's been much easier to pitch, to know
Yeah.
that you just have to have your shit together. Like, you need to know what you're going to be writing about, and put the editor at ease that you're not
Mhm.
going to turn in something completely different than what they had in their mind. Some editors go the distance to, need an outline. Like,
Mhm.
give me an outline of the story already, so I can already plan where this is going to go, what month, what time. And then always, going off of that, why. Like, why are we telling this story? Why do we need to feature this person? It has to come with the why, besides they're really cool, they're really pretty,
Yeah.
they're in LA. Like, it can't be just that. It's they have a movie coming out, they have an event coming up, they just hit a huge milestone, they went viral this week. So being able to know the specific reason of why they need to publish that story.
Cool. That's great advice. Um, oh, I had a question. I had a question, but I lost it. No, I
I
want
talk
to
too much.
know. No, you're doing great. You're doing great, honey. Um, Dang, I really lost it. I wanted advice on interview, like giving an interview. And in
Mm.
podcasting, I mean, your girl started one, so I need some help. Any advice you have for me?
Oh, I'm still learning podcasting, so I don't want to come off as an expert in that. I'm still learning. I think with sports podcasting in particular, but I realize this goes for anything, and where I've made the mistake is not preparing. Like,
Yeah.
not feeling like, "Oh yeah, I know. Like, I can just talk." You know, people that's what
Yeah.
people think podcasting is. "Oh yeah, we're just talking." But you really have to prepare, and I just, there's outlines, you read through it, but when you do the extra research, when you find the little nuggets, the fun facts, and really be able to bring that to the podcast, bring that
Yeah.
to the host or as the host, that is amazing. And it really makes a difference, because if you go there and you're like, oh yeah, I did a podcast about, it was more like pop culture,
Mhm.
and I kind of know about it, like celebs and stuff, but I
Yeah.
think I really have to do research, and I didn't. I ran out of time, and I went on that podcast and I had nothing to say. I had nothing to add to the
Yeah.
conversation because I didn't do that research. And I was like, "Okay, that was terrible. Never again." Now I know I need to be super prepared, over prepared. You need to
Yeah.
know more information than ever. So, yes, I've learned that about podcasting.
That's good. I agree. What um what writing advice would you give if someone wanted to become a writer? Yeah. Or yeah, fresh out of college, Jordan, what would you tell her?
Ooh, oh, baby, fresh out of college,
Yeah.
Jordan. With J school under her belt, you're gonna change the journalism world. I keep hitting the mic. But I would say, I think one thing I learned, and this might be specific to me, but I'm sure other people feel this way, of having a story, you have it already written in your head before you interview somebody, or at least I do. When I interview someone, I'm like, okay, these are the things I want to point out. This is a story I want to tell. And when I would kind of share like who I was interviewing, I felt pressure, and like it had to be this perfect story, and oh, are you going to talk about this, or are you going to talk about this, and feeling the need to put that in the story even though that wasn't the story I was going to tell.
Mhm.
So being able to kind of sift through outside opinions and also other stories that were written on that person, I think that's also something. I read those stories, I'm like,
Yeah.
dang, that was really good. Like, how am I going to retell those same events? How am I going to do it differently? Like, this is in the New York Times, or really trying to put those other rivals on a pedestal when that's totally not necessary. Trusting in yourself that you're going to tell a different story, and it's your writing, it's your words. As a writer, you get to create the sentences, the word choice. You chose that word for a specific reason.
Mhm.
That's what you felt in that moment when you were interviewing them. You took in your surroundings and you're describing something that is unique to you. This is your perspective. So, not putting so much weight in other writers that maybe have told a similar story or something like it, and just knowing and trusting in yourself that your words, your sentences, your paragraphs, your structure, all of that, with probably an editor's
Um, yeah, that's really good advice. I think kind of all your advice, which is kind of what we say in other episodes, we all agree that just authentically being yourself and bringing that into any position is really your power. Like that's like the gift that you have, is like just bringing your true, like authentic self.
Yeah.
And I love the way you talk about writing. You make it just sound so like magical and cool, and you're just so intentional about it. It's just cool. It's cool to see. Any
It's
current
hard.
oh, sorry. Yeah. Any current projects or things that you'd like to share?
Yeah. So I just started a new job like
Yes,
last
yeah.
week.
How's it going?
Um, it's going. We are
Good.
figuring out a virtual new job. That is very different.
Is it
But
all online?
yeah, it's all through the
Cool.
computer, and I think it's just very interesting starting a new job and going through everything virtually. It's really strange.
Yeah.
But it's called Mojo, and it's about youth sports and coaches. So I would encourage everyone to follow me on Instagram at Jordan Ligons, but also follow at
Hey.
You Got Mojo, because it's for anyone that was an athlete when they were younger, but also are taking the jump into coaching. And it's
Mm,
not just specifically, a soccer coach. It's the parent coach. It's someone who's volunteering, someone who just wants to be involved. And I don't have any kids yet, but I know that's going to be me. So that's why I
yeah.
also took this opportunity, because it's so relatable. And yeah, I'm really excited to be working with that brand. So it's going to be
It's gonna
good.
be great. Yeah, it's gonna be great. I was gonna say, where can our listeners find you at, but at Jordan Ligons. I will add that all to the show notes too. But thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was the best.
Yes, it's so fun. Okay.